Welcome back. We're talking to the two Republicans who are vying to be Secretary of State and take on the Democrat after the primary. I'm going to start with you, Jason Gibbs. I think political analysts have said clearly this is the race that has the most charged feeling to it. There's the perhaps bitter, perhaps nasty has been some of the words that have come from this. Why do you think that is? What is the reason that this race is feeling like that? My inbox fills up with more emails from these two than like even the people running for governor.
Well, I wouldn't characterize the race that way by any means.
How would you characterize it?
I think it's competitive, and we have two very competitive, very articulate, very bright, capable candidates who I think, frankly, either one of us would be good secretaries of state.
That's your ad, right?
My endorsement.
Well, and the truth is, both of us, I think, want this job, and it's certainly been a spirited campaign. My focus has been on running a very positive, issue-oriented campaign, focusing on articulating my vision for that office, making it a center of excellence in public management, really working to boost its ability to increase economic activity, reduce its reliance on taxpayers, introduce this more dynamic, more entrepreneurial type of public management that we introduced at Forest and Park. So that's my focus, and we're going to continue to have, I think, a very robust debate as the campaign goes on. But the primary is 29 days from today, and we'll see how it shakes out.
The tone, what do you think of it?
Well, I think Jason's right. You got a couple of articulate, competitive guys who aren't afraid to state their opinion, and I think that that's what a primary is supposed to do. I do think that it's also a matter of the two of us coming at the office from very different directions. My approach and my perspective is an outside Montpelier perspective, one that's based upon 20 years of work, volunteer, and as a professional from outside Montpelier, and hoping to be a fresh voice and in Montpelier to help get Vermont back on a more sustainable track. And Jason's is more of a perspective from inside government. And I think that those different perspectives, for instance, he uses the phrase entrepreneurial public management a lot. Well, from outside Montpelier, the concept of entrepreneurship and government seemed to be an oxymoron. Entrepreneurship, contemplates, putting capital at risk, and there's nothing about government that puts things at risk. Governments don't go out of business; they just increase taxes. So, I don't think that vision is the vision that I bring from outside Montpelier, based upon my real-world practical experience.
I think that's a very good distinction between us. I don't share his view of my position on the issues or that particular definition of the ideas that I'm offering, but it's true that we have different approaches, and I think rather than rely on shallow political rhetoric that you can get on the cheap from any Washington political consultant, outsider versus insider, I would encourage folks to look at our ideas, take a real hard look at which one of us is offering the truly transformative proposals, the ones that are going to change the way that office does business in a very positive way, increase its productivity, increase the value of that office to the people of Vermont and to the constituents, the specific constituents like licensed professionals or folks who are trying to create new businesses and create new jobs. How exactly are the ideas that we're offering going to make it better and be more valuable in service to them? Take a look at those ideas and decide for yourself which of us you think represents the best candidate, Republican candidate for Secretary of State, and I hope the best candidate in the general election for Secretary of State. So, for me, entrepreneurial public management means taking the best of what works in the private sector and applying it in a public management sphere to our government enterprises, doing things like going to the areas where we can make the most difference in terms of generating economic activity, working to prioritize those actions that are going to reduce government's reliance on taxpayers, being sure that we are rethinking and revitalizing or reforming every process and every system within a public enterprise on a regular basis so that we can be sure it constitutes the best, most pro-growth job creation policy that we can put in place. That's what I mean by entrepreneurial public management. And it's one thing for me to say that we should implement this kind of new management. And it's another thing, because politicians say we need to do more with less all the time, it's another thing for me to be able to point to real results. And I think if you look at my record at Forest and Parks, you'll see that I'm a capable executive manager, and I'm the only candidate for Secretary of State who can point to significant results like reducing our reliance on taxpayers by 30% in a public enterprise while also increasing its productivity.
Well, along those lines, I mean, Jason has pointed out as we go around, follow each other around the state at these various events, that he reduced his department's reliance on general funds, and he's pointed to that as part of that entrepreneurial management style. But, you know, I decided to take a look at the fiscal year 10 and fiscal year 11 budgets for his department, and I discovered that his department's budget actually went up in fiscal year 11. And I was wondering, well, how did that happen if your reliance goes down on general funds? Well, lo and behold, it includes over $550,000 of increased federal funds, including over $375,000 in stimulus funds, which are one-time, unsustainable funds that are being used to prop up an operational budget, putting aside the stimulus funds that were used on the capital side. So I do think that there is a fundamental change. At the municipal level, you can't rely on that. You need to level fund, you need to deal with property tax burdens and deal with that on a very fundamental, direct level. So I do think that there's a problem. Entrepreneurs can't go up and get stimulus funds. That's not how you deal with budgets in the real world. You deal with the real world by coming up with a sustainable way to fund your enterprise.
Well, I would suggest, with all due respect to my opponent, that he go back and take a little bit closer look at those numbers. The $550,000 there is a federal grant that flows into our fiscal year budget. The year-to-year budget from 10 to 11 certainly didn't increase. It's a good thing we're not running for auditor, because the math there is a little fuzzy. The $550,000, if my memory serves me precisely correct, most of it came from a state and federal forestry grant that we used to invest in the eradication of invasive species throughout the state forest system and the state park system. We also used that money to create jobs for Vermonters, not just in that invasive species eradication program, but also in our park interpreter program, which is something that had been previously cut. Beyond that, however, I think when you look at our general fund taxpayer finance spending, the money that the taxpayers of Vermont were providing for out of the general fund, the broad-based tax revenue out of state government, it went down by more than $2.1 million over the time that I was commissioner. And the reason we were able to do that is because we were prioritizing things like timber sales as a counter-cyclical economic tool to get more forest products economy activity to keep loggers working, trucks running, sawdust flying in our mills at a time when the forest products economy in Vermont was struggling to weather the Great Recession. We also emphasized park visits and park utilizations. This isn't including the capital investments that we were making.
Through your whole record as commissioner, just maybe one last point on this, and let's move on to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, the fact of the matter is $372,750 in one-time stimulus funding was included in the operational budget of a department that, according to the budget bills passed in 2010 and 2011, went from $18.7 million to $18.8 million. It was an increased budget in a year when departments were being asked to cut, and you had one-time stimulus funding to the tune of $372,000 that was propping up the operational budget.
Now, I mean, I don't have the benefit of Chris's notes here, but I can tell you that I lived through this experience of having to cut our budget, and the reality is that the budget went down about 3.6% over that same period of time. But the reason that it wasn't down 10% or 15% or 20% was because of the entrepreneurial kind of management that we applied, because we were able to generate non-tax revenue to sort of grow more of what we eat. And I can tell you that the budget did not go up, because if the budget had gone up, I wouldn't have had to look 6 people in the eye and tell them that unfortunately we didn't have money in our budget to provide them their jobs and turn their world upside down. So with all due respect, I know the budget of my former department very well, and I understand the point that he's making, that for some reason I think he's arguing that I'm less of a Republican because I accepted stimulus money, but I'm just not buying that.
Well, we have just less than a minute here. The time has flown. I'm just curious, in that time, briefly, are Republicans energized about this race, or are they really focused on the governor's race? How do you guys get attended?
I think Republicans are energized about everything right now, from top to bottom, local state reps up through the gubernatorial and federal races, because everybody realizes that 2010 is a crucial year for Vermont if we're going to get our state back on a sustainable track.
Yeah, I agree. I think Republicans in particular are very interested in what's happening not only in the Democratic gubernatorial primary, but also in the lieutenant gubernatorial primary and the primary for Secretary of State on our side. And you know, the response that I think we've both been getting is an enthusiastic one, and I look forward to moving forward in the campaign.
Well, thank you both for your time. Jason Gibbs and Chris Roy. You can go to their websites if you want to learn more about them. And next week here on You Can Quote Me, we're going to have the Democrats in the primary race for Secretary of State. Until then, I'm Kristen Carlson. Have a great day.